Imagine a land where empires ruled half the known world, where kings built cities from stone and gold, and where revolutions changed the course of modern history. This is the story of Iran, a civilization older than most nations on earth. From the rise of the mighty empire of Cyrus the Great to the burning of Persepolis by Alexander the Great, to the powerful revolution led by Ruhollah Khomeini that shocked the modern world. Empires rise, kings fall, revolutions erupt. But through 2,500 years of war, faith, power, and survival, one civilization refuses to disappear. This is the entire history of Arrow will explain everything in this video, step by step. Don't skip it. History is not merely a collection of dates and battles. It is the echo of human footsteps across centuries, the whisper of empires rising, the cry of civilizations falling, and the enduring heartbeat of a people who refuse to disappear. Few lands on earth carry a story as long, as turbulent, and as extraordinary as Iran, a nation known for most of its history as Persia. For more than 2.5 millennia, its mountains, deserts, and cities have witnessed the rise of kings, revolutions of faith, and struggles for identity. To understand Iran is to step into a living epic, one that stretches from the dawn of ancient empires to the uncertain world of today. The birth of Persia long before the modern nation called Iran existed. The Iranian plateau was home to ancient civilizations. Tribes of Indo-Iranian peoples settled this vast land thousands of years ago, bringing languages, traditions, and beliefs that would shape the region forever. Among them emerged the Persians. In the 6th century BCE, a remarkable leader rose from among these tribes, Cyrus the Great. Under his leadership, the Persian tribes united and began building something the world had never seen before, a vast empire that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the edges of India. This was the Achaemenid Empire, the first great Persian empire. Unlike many conquerors, Cyrus ruled with a vision that astonished the ancient world. He allowed conquered peoples to keep their religions and customs. He freed enslaved populations and respected local cultures. His rule laid the foundation for a governing philosophy that many historians consider one of the earliest expressions of human rights. At its height, the Persian Empire ruled nearly half the known world. Its capital cities, Pasargadae and later Persepolis, became symbols of imperial power. Massive palaces, carved stone reliefs, and grand ceremonial halls testified to the wealth and organization of the empire. But even the greatest empires cannot escape the passage of time. The clash of civilizations, Persia's rise inevitably brought it into conflict with the expanding Greek world. The Persian kings Darius and Xerxes launched massive campaigns against the Greek city-states, leading to legendary battles such as Marathon and Thermopylae. Though Persia remained powerful, the balance of power began to shift. In 330 BCE, a young Macedonian conqueror named Alexander swept across the Persian Empire. Within a few years, the empire that had dominated the world for 2 centuries collapsed beneath his armies. Alexander burned Persepolis and ended the Achaemenid dynasty. Yet Persia did not disappear. Empires would fall, but the Persian civilization endured. The return of Persian power centuries later, new Iranian dynasties rose again. Among them were the Parthians, fierce horse archers who built an empire that challenged Rome itself. But it was the Sasanian Empire that truly revived the glory of ancient Persia. From the 3rd to the 7th century CE, the Sasanians created one of the most sophisticated states of the ancient world. Their government was highly organized, their cities prosperous, and their culture vibrant. Zoroastrianism became the spiritual foundation of the empire, shaping law, philosophy, and daily life. The Sasanians were Rome's greatest rival in the East. For centuries, the two superpowers battled across deserts and mountains, draining both empires in endless wars. Then a new force emerged from the Arabian Peninsula. The coming of Islam in the 7th century, the armies of the early Muslim caliphate surged out of Arabia. Within a generation, the Sasanian Empire collapsed, and Persia became part of the expanding Islamic world. For many civilizations, such a conquest might have erased their identity, but Persia did something remarkable. Instead of disappearing, Persian culture reshaped the Islamic world itself. Persian scholars, poets, scientists, and administrators became central to Islamic civilization. Persian language and culture flourished again. Cities like Baghdad, Nishapur, and Isfahan became centers of learning where Persian intellectual traditions blended with Islamic thought. The Persian spirit adapted and survived. The rise of a Shia nation by the 16th century, a new dynasty emerged that would redefine Iran's identity, the Safavid Empire. In 1501, Shah Ismail declared Twelver Shi'ism the official religion of the state. This decision permanently transformed the religious character of Iran and distinguished it from its largely Sunni neighbors. Under the Safavids, Iran experienced a cultural renaissance. Architecture flourished, poetry thrived, and cities like Isfahan became some of the most beautiful in the world. But the Safavid state also faced constant warfare with the Ottoman Empire to the west and other rivals. By the early 18th century, the Safavid dynasty collapsed. Yet again, Iran's story continued. The age of warriors and kings and the chaos that followed. One of Iran's most formidable figures emerged, Nader Shah. A brilliant military commander, he rebuilt the Persian state and launched campaigns that stretched from Central Asia to India. At its peak, his empire became the largest Iran had seen since the ancient Sasanians, but his empire did not last long. After his death, Iran entered a period of instability before eventually falling under the rule of the Qajar dynasty in the late 18th century. During the 19th century, Iran faced immense pressure from the growing empires of Russia and Britain. Foreign influence weakened the state, and the country struggled with economic hardship and political turmoil. Out of this turmoil came a new demand from the Iranian people: reform. Reform. The first revolution in 1905, merchants, intellectuals, and religious leaders united in protest against absolute monarchy. Their struggle led to the Persian constitutional revolution, one of the earliest constitutional movements in the Middle East. By 1906, Iran established a parliament and a constitution, a remarkable achievement for its time. But the struggle between reformers and authoritarian rulers would continue for decades. The age of the Shahs in 1921, a military officer named Reza Khan seized power and later crowned himself Shah. He began a sweeping program of modernization, building railroads, strengthening the military, and attempting to transform Iran into a modern nation-state. In 1935, the country officially adopted the name Iran, meaning land of the Aryans. His son, Mohammad Reza Shah, continued these reforms. But rapid modernization, political repression, and growing inequality created deep resentment among many Iranians. By the late 1970s, the country was on the edge of revolution. The Islamic Revolution in 1979, millions of Iranians filled the streets demanding the end of the monarchy. The Shah fled the country, and a new revolutionary government emerged under the leadership of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The revolution ended centuries of monarchy and established the Islamic Republic of Iran. But the new state faced enormous challenges. Shortly after the revolution, Iran became locked in a devastating 8-year war with Iraq. The conflict claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and reshaped the region. Iran in the modern world in the decades since. Iran has remained one of the most influential and controversial nations in global politics. The country has struggled with sanctions, internal political tensions, and waves of protest from citizens demanding reform. Yet at the same time, Iran continues to possess a deep cultural pride rooted in thousands of years of history. Modern Iran is a paradox, ancient yet modern, revolutionary yet traditional. The eternal story of Iran, what makes Iran extraordinary, is not simply its age, it is its resilience. Empires have risen and fallen on its soil. Religions have changed. Dynasties have come and gone. Foreign armies have invaded, revolutions have erupted, and political systems have transformed. Yet the civilization of Iran, its language, its poetry, its philosophy, its identity, has never vanished. From the palaces of Persepolis to the streets of modern Tehran, the Iranian story continues to unfold. History reminds us of one profound truth. Nations are not only defined by their victories, they are defined by their endurance. And few nations in human history have endured or reinvented themselves, quite like Iran. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join the space of presence and share you deepest now in the comments below. Long before the modern nation called Iran existed, the vast land known as Persia was home to scattered tribes, ancient settlements, and wandering peoples whose stories stretch back thousands of years. The Iranian plateau, surrounded by rugged mountains and harsh deserts, shaped the character of those who lived there. Life demanded resilience. Communities learned to survive drought, distance, and isolation. Out of these conditions emerged a culture defined by endurance, pride, and a deep sense of destiny. Among the many tribes who lived in this region were the Persians, an Indo-Iranian people who gradually settled in the southwestern part of the plateau. At first, they were not powerful rulers or builders of empires. They were small tribal groups living among other peoples such as the Medes, Elamites, and Babylonians. Their world was one of shifting alliances, local conflicts, and the constant challenge of survival. Yet history often turns on the life of a single extraordinary individual. In the 6th century BCE, a young leader emerged whose name would echo across the centuries: Cyrus the Great. Born around 600 BCE, Cyrus grew up during a time when the Persian tribes were subjects of the powerful Median Empire. The Medes dominated much of the region, and Persia remained a relatively minor kingdom beneath their authority. But Cyrus possessed something rare in any age: vision combined with courage. Around 550 BCE, he led a rebellion against the Median king. What followed was not merely a revolt, but the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the ancient world. Cyrus defeated the Medes and united the Persians and Medes into a single political force. In doing so, he laid the foundation for what historians now call the Achaemenid Empire. From that moment forward, the story of Persia became the story of expansion. Cyrus proved to be not only a skilled military commander, but also a remarkable statesman. One by one, powerful kingdoms fell before his armies. In 546 BCE, he defeated the wealthy kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia, capturing its capital and gaining control of immense resources. Soon after, his forces turned toward one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, Babylon. Babylon was legendary. Its towering walls, grand temples, and advanced civilization made it one of the most important centers of the ancient Near East. Conquering such a city would normally require devastating warfare. Yet when Cyrus entered Babylon in 539 BCE, the conquest unfolded with surprising restraint. Rather than destroying the city or enslaving its people, Cyrus presented himself as a liberator. He respected local traditions and religious practices. He allowed exiled communities, including the Jewish population that had been displaced decades earlier, to return to their homeland. His policies were recorded on an ancient clay artifact known as the Cyrus cylinder, which many scholars consider one of the earliest statements of principles resembling human rights. This approach to leadership was revolutionary for its time. Ancient empires often ruled through fear, destruction, and forced assimilation. Cyrus instead chose a different path. He understood that an empire stretching across many cultures and languages could survive only through tolerance and cooperation. Under his rule, the Persian Empire expanded rapidly. From the eastern Mediterranean to Central Asia, vast territories came under Persian control. Roads were built to connect distant regions, allowing communication and trade to flourish. Governors known as satraps were appointed to manage provinces while still respecting local customs. The empire's diversity became its strength. Peoples of many different backgrounds lived within Persian territory: Egyptians, Babylonians, Greeks, Jews, and countless others. Each maintained their own traditions, religions, and languages. Instead of forcing cultural uniformity, the Persian administration encouraged stability by allowing communities to maintain their identity. This political vision allowed the empire to grow to an unprecedented scale. By the time of Cyrus's death around 530 BCE, the Persian Empire had already become one of the largest political entities the world had ever seen. But the story of its expansion did not end with him. His successors continued building the imperial system he created. Among them was Darius I, one of the most capable rulers of the Achaemenid Dynasty. Darius reorganized the empire into a highly structured administrative system, dividing the territory into provinces governed by satraps who answered directly to the king. He also built one of the ancient world's most impressive infrastructure networks. A vast system of royal roads connected distant parts of the empire. Messages could travel quickly between cities, carrying information that allowed the central government to maintain control over enormous distances. Trade expanded along these routes, bringing wealth and cultural exchange across the empire. Darius also commissioned the construction of magnificent architectural projects. Among them was the ceremonial capital of Persepolis, a city built not merely for administration but for symbolic power. Its grand staircases, towering columns, and carved reliefs depicted representatives from across the empire bringing tribute to the Persian king. These images told a powerful story. They showed not defeated enemies, but diverse peoples standing together within a vast imperial community. The Persian Empire portrayed itself not simple. We as a conquering force, but as a world order governed by law, organization, and royal authority. Yet the empire's immense size also brought new challenges. As Persia expanded westward, it came into contact with the Greek city-states along the Aegean coast. These small but fiercely independent communities valued political autonomy and resisted Persian influence. Tensions gradually escalated into open conflict. In the early 5th century BCE, Persian kings attempted to extend their authority into mainland Greece. These campaigns led to some of the most famous battles in ancient history, including Marathon and Thermopylae. Though the Persians possessed enormous resources and manpower, the Greek resistance prevented them from fully conquering the region. Even so, the Persian Empire remained the dominant superpower of its age. Stretching across 3 continents, it connected civilizations that had once been isolated from one another. Trade routes carried goods, ideas, and technologies between distant lands. Persian administration influenced systems of governance across the ancient world. The empire also played a crucial role in shaping cultural and intellectual exchange. Scholars, artisans, merchants, and travelers moved freely across imperial territories, spreading knowledge and traditions. What began as a tribal kingdom in the mountains of Persia had become a global power. At its height, the Achaemenid Empire governed nearly half of the known world's population. Its rulers commanded vast armies, managed enormous resources, and oversaw a multicultural society that stretched from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean Sea. And at the heart of this transformation stood the legacy of Cyrus, a leader whose vision extended beyond conquest to the idea that an empire could endure through respect, cooperation, and wise governance.
His rise marked the beginning of a civilize. His rise marked the beginning of a civilize.
Eshin, whose influence would echo through centuries of history, shaping the political, cultural, and philosophical traditions of the region that would one day be known as Iran. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join the space of presence and share your deepest now in the comments below. The Persian Empire once stood as the greatest power the ancient world had ever seen. From the deserts of Egypt to the valleys of Central Asia, from the Mediterranean coast to the borders of India, its authority stretched across continents. Yet even the mightiest empires are never permanent. Even the mightiest empires are never permanent. Power shifts, new leaders emerge, and history begins to turn in unexpected directions. In the late 4th century BCE, that turn point arrived in the form of a young conqueror from Macedonia, Alexander the Great. Alexander inherited a powerful army from his father, King Philip II of Macedon, but his ambitions extended far beyond the borders of Greece. He dreamed of conquering the vast Persian Empire that had dominated the Eastern world for more than 2 centuries. In 334 BCE, he crossed into Asia Minor with a relatively small but highly disciplined force. At that time, the Persian throne was held by Darius III, the final ruler of the Achaemenid Dynasty. Though the empire still possessed enormous resources, internal struggles and political divisions had weakened its ability to respond quickly to the rising threat from the west. The first major confrontation came at the Battle of the Granicus River. Against expectations, Alexander's army defeated the Persian forces defending Asia Minor. The victory opened the gates of the region and allowed the Macedonian king to push deeper into Persian territory. As Alexander advanced, many cities surrendered while others resisted fiercely. Yet the momentum remained with the Macedonian army. The decisive moment arrived in 333 BCE at the Battle of Issus, where Alexander personally confronted Darius III. Despite commanding a much larger force, the Persian king was unable to hold the line. The battle ended with Darius fleeing the field and Alexander claiming victory. The fall of the Persian Empire had begun. Over the next few years, Alexander continued his relentless campaign. He marched south along the Mediterranean coast, capturing key cities and eventually entering Egypt, where he was welcomed as a liberator. But his ultimate objective remained the heart of Persia itself. In 331 BCE, the two armies met again at the Battle of Gaugamela. This battle would determine the fate of the ancient empire. Darius gathered a massive army drawn from across his vast territories. The battlefield was carefully chosen to give the Persian forces every advantage. Yet Alexander's tactical brilliance once again turned the tide. Through a bold cavalry charge, he broke through the Persian center and forced Darius to flee for the second time. With that defeat, the power of the Achaemenid Empire collapsed. Alexander marched into the great Persian capitals, Susa, Babylon, and eventually the ceremonial city of Persepolis. Persepolis had long stood as a symbol of Persian royal power. Its magnificent palaces and towering columns represented centuries of imperial wealth and authority. Yet the city's fate would become one of the most dramatic moments in ancient history. During Alexander's occupation, Persepolis was set on fire. Whether the destruction was a deliberate act of revenge for earlier Persian invasions of Greece or the result of a drunken celebration remains debated by historians. What is certain is that the flames consumed the grand palaces and marked the symbolic end of the Achaemenid Empire. By 330 BCE, The empire that Cyrus the Great had built 2 centuries earlier no longer existed, yet the story of Persia I'd not vanish with its fall. Alexander himself seemed fascinated by Persian culture. Rather than ruling solely as a foreign conqueror, he adopted many Persian customs and attempted to merge Greek and Persian traditions within his new empire. Persian administrators remained in positions of authority, and Persian nobles continued to play roles in governance. But Alexander's empire was short-lived. After his sudden death in 323 BCE, his generals divided his territories among themselves. Persia fell under the rule of the Seleucid Dynasty, a Hellenistic kingdom that attempted to spread Greek culture throughout the region. Greek cities were founded across Persian lands. Greek language and philosophy spread through the eastern Mediterranean and into the Iranian plateau. For a time, it seemed as though Persian identity might gradually fade into the broader Hellenistic world. Yet, beneath the surface, something powerful remained. The cultural traditions, language, and political instincts of the Iranian peoples endured. Rural communities continued practicing their customs, preserving stories and beliefs that stretched back long before the arrival of Alexander's armies. Over time, resistance to foreign rule began to grow. In the 3rd century BCE, a new Iranian power emerged from the northeastern regions of the former Persian Empire. This rising force would eventually challenge both the Seleucid rulers and the mighty Roman Empire to the west. They were known as the Parthians. The Parthian Empire was founded by the Safavid Dynasty, a group of Iranian nobles who gradually expanded their authority across the plateau. Unlike the centralized bureaucracy of the earlier Achaemenid rulers, the Parthians governed through a looser system of regional powers and noble families. Their greatest strength lay in their military tactics. Parthian warriors became famous for their mastery rounded archery. Their cavalry could ride swiftly across the battlefield while firing arrows with deadly precision. One tactic in particular became legendary, the Parthian shot, in which a retreating rider would turn back and fire at pursuing enemies. These tactics proved devastating against heavily armored Roman legions. In 53 BCE, the Roman general Crassus led a massive army into Parthian territory, expecting an easy victory. Instead, his forces were annihilated at the Battle of Carrhae by Parthian horse archers and cavalry. The victory shocked the Roman world and established Parthia as a formidable rival to Rome. For centuries, the Parthian Empire controlled much of the Iranian plateau and surrounding regions. Trade flourished along routes connecting the Mediterranean with Central Asia and China, including the famous Silk Road, yet the Parthian political system remained decentralized, with powerful noble families often competing for influence. Over time, these internal rivalries weakened the state. In the early 3rd century CE, another transformation began. A new dynasty emerged from the province of Persis in southern Iran. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join this space of presence and share your deepest now in the comments below. By the early 7th century, the ancient land of Persia stood at a crossroads. For centuries, it had been ruled by the powerful Sasanian Empire, a dynasty that had restored Persian authority after the fall of the Parthians and rebuilt a state that rivaled the strength of the Roman world. The Sasanians governed a sophisticated empire filled with thriving cities, trade routes, scholars, and artisans. Their courts displayed immense wealth, their armies defended vast borders, and their religion, Zoroastrianism, formed the spiritual backbone of society. Yet beneath the grandeur, the empire had grown fragile. For generations, the Sasanians had fought exhausting wars with the Byzantine Empire to the west. These conflicts drained resources, devastated borderlands, and strained the loyalty of many communities living under imperial rule. Heavy taxation burdened farmers and merchants. Political struggles among nobles and royal families weakened the central government. The empire that had once stood strong began to show cracks in its foundations. At the same time, a profound transformation was unfolding to the south on the Arabian Peninsula. A new religious movement had emerged under the leadership of Muhammad, whose teachings united many Arab tribes under the banner of a new faith, Islam. Within a few years of Muhammad's death in 632 CE, Arab armies carrying this faith began expanding far beyond Arabia. The rise of these armies marked the beginning of one of the most significant turning points in Persian history, the Muslim conquest of Persia. At first, the Sasanians underestimated the threat. The Arab forces seemed small compared to the enormous imperial armies that had once fought Rome. But these new armies possessed something powerful: religious unity and extraordinary momentum. Their commanders moved quickly across the desert frontiers, capturing towns as strategic routes before the Persian leadership could fully respond. One of the earliest major confrontations occurred at the Battle of Qadisiyeh in 636 CE. The Sasanian army, still formidable in size, faced the Arab forces in a decisive clash. Despite their strength, the Persians were ultimately defeated after days of intense fighting. The loss opened the road to the great imperial capital of Ctesiphon. When the Arab armies entered Ctesiphon, they found a city filled with treasures and symbols of imperial authority. The fall of this capital marked a devastating blow to the Sasanian state. Persian forces attempted to regroup and resist, but their efforts were increasingly fragmented. The final collapse came in 651 CE when the last Sasanian ruler, Yazdegerd III, was killed while fleeing eastward. With his death, the Sasanian Empire, one of the great powers of the ancient world, came to an end. For many societies, such a conquest might have erased centuries of cultural identity. Yet Persia responded in a unique way. The Iranian people gradually adopted Islam, but they did not abandon their cultural traditions. Instead, Persian civilization began to reshape the Islamic world from within. Persian administrators, scholars, poets, and thinkers played central roles in the development of the new Islamic empires.
Stars, poets, and thinkers played central roles in the development of the new Islamic empires.
Under the early Islamic caliphates, Persian lands became part of a vast network of trade and intellectual exchange that stretched from Spain to Central Asia. Cities across Persia flourished as centers of learning and culture. Persian scholars contributed in mathematics, medicine, philosophy, and astronomy, helping to fuel what historians often describe as the Islamic Golden Age. The Persian language also experienced a remarkable revival. Although Arabic became the language of religious scholarship and administration, Persian gradually returned as a powerful literary and cultural language. Poets and writers began producing works that blended ancient Persian traditions with Islamic themes, creating a rich cultural synthesis. Among the greatest of these poets was Ferdowsi, whose monumental epic poem, the Shahnameh, preserved the legendary history of ancient Persia. Written around the year 1000 CE, the Shahnameh tells the stories of Persian kings, heroes, and battles that stretch back to mythological times. Through this work, the memory of pre-Islamic Persia survived within a new Islamic cultural framework. Persian influence spread far beyond the borders of Iran itself. Persian became the language of literature and court culture across much of Central Asia and South Asia. Rulers in distant lands adopted Persian customs, administrative systems, and artistic traditions. The fusion of Persian culture and Islamic civilization produced extraordinary achievements in architecture, art, and scholarship. Persian cities became renowned for their gardens, mosques, libraries, and centers of learning. Dynasties such as the Samanids and later the Seljuks ruled large portions of the Iranian world, often promoting Persian culture while governing under Islamic political structures. Persian scholars wrote influential works in philosophy, science, and theology that shaped intellectual life across the Muslim world. The great philosopher Avicenna, known in Persian as Ibn Sina, produced groundbreaking works in medicine and philosophy that would influence both Islamic and European thought for centuries. His writings became standard texts in medieval universities. Persian mysticism also flourished during this era. Spiritual traditions within Islam gave rise to poetic expressions of divine love and human longing. Poets such as Rumi created verses that transcended religious boundaries, speaking to universal themes of faith, unity, and the search for meaning. These intellectual and cultural developments demonstrated that Persia had not simply been conquered, it had transformed the civilization that conquered it. At the same time, Persian lands remained politically complex. Different dynasties rose and fell, and foreign powers occasionally invaded the region. Yet through these changes, Persian identity continued to evolve rather than disappear. The blending of ancient Persian heritage with Islamic belief created a unique cultural identity that distinguished Iran from many of its neighbors. Persian traditions of governance, literature, art, and philosophy became deeply intertwined with Islamic values. Across centuries of political change, this cultural synthesis remained remarkably resilient. The Iranian plateau became a crossroads of civilizations where ideas traveled between East and West. Traders, scholars, and travelers moved along routes linking China, India, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. Persian culture served as a bridge connecting these worlds, carrying knowledge, artistic styles, and intellectual traditions across vast distances. In cities and villages across the region, the rhythms of daily life reflected both ancient heritage and new religious devotion. Mosques rose beside markets, scholars debated theology, and philosophy and poets recited verses that echoed through royal courts and humble gatherings alike. The transformation of Persia after the Islamic conquest was not a simple story of defeat or replacement. It was a profound process of adaptation, cultural exchange, and renewal in which the civilization of Persia reshaped itself within the expanding world of Islam. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join this space of presence and share your deepest now in the comments below. By the end of the 15th century, the lands of Iran were fragmented and uncertain. For centuries, the region had experienced waves of foreign invasions, internal rivalries, and shifting dynasties. The once unified Persian realm had splintered into competing territories ruled by local warlords, tribal confederations, and regional powers. Cities that had once been centers of learning and prosperity struggled to maintain stability. Yet beneath this political chaos, the cultural and historical memory of Persia remained powerful, waiting for a force strong enough to unite the land again. That force emerged in the form of a young and charismatic leader named Shah Ismail VI. Born in 1487, Ismail grew up surrounded by both danger and legend. His family belonged to a religious and political movement known as the Safavid Order, a mystical Sufi brotherhood that had gradually transformed into a militant organization with loyal followers across parts of Iran and Anatolia. These followers, known as the Qazilbash, because of their distinctive red headgear, believed that Ismail possessed both spiritual authority and royal destiny. When Ismail was only 14 years old, he began gathering supporters and preparing for conquest. What followed was one of the most dramatic rises to power in Persian history. In 1501, his forces defeated rival rulers and entered the historic city of Tabriz. There, Ismail declared himself the ruler of a new Persian state and founded what historians call the Safavid Empire. This moment marked the rebirth of a unified Iranian kingdom after centuries of fragmentation. But Ismail's most important decision was not simply political, it was religious. He declared that the official faith of the new state would be Twelver Shi'ism, a branch of Islam that believed in a line of 12 divinely guided leaders descending from the Prophet Muhammad. At the time, most of the Islamic world was predominantly Sunni, including powerful neighbors such as the Ottoman Empire. By establishing Shia Islam as the state religion, Ismail transformed the identity of Iran forever. The change was not immediate or simple. Large portions of the population had previously practiced Sunni Islam, while others followed older traditions that blended local customs with Islamic beliefs. The Safavid rulers therefore launched an extensive campaign to promote Shiite teachings across the kingdom. Scholars were invited from other regions to educate communities, religious institutions were built, and the rituals of Shiite devotion gradually became woven into daily life. Over time, this religious transformation created a powerful sense of unity within the Safavid state while also distinguishing Iran from its surrounding neighbors. Yet the rise of the Safavid Empire also brought intense military challenges. To the west stood the expanding power of the Ottoman Empire, one of the most formidable states of the early modern world. The Ottomans followed Sunnism as both a political and religious threat. The conflict between these two empires soon erupted into open warfare. In 1514, the armies of Shah Ismail faced the Ottoman forces led by Selim at the Battle of Chaldiran. At the Battle of Chaldiran, the Ottomans possessed advanced artillery and firearms, technologies that the Safavid army had not yet fully adopted. The battle ended in a decisive Ottoman victory, forcing the Safavids to retreat and temporarily weakening Ismail's authority. Despite the defeat, the Safavid state survived and gradually adapted. Later rulers strengthened the military, reorganized the government, and expanded control over the Iranian plateau. Among the greatest of these rulers was Shah Abbas I, often called Shah Abbas the Great. Ascending the throne in 1588, Abbas inherited a kingdom threatened by both internal disorder and external enemies. With remarkable determination, he reorganized the army, reducing the power of tribal forces and creating a more centralized military system. He recruited soldiers from diverse backgrounds and introduced modern firearms to strengthen the state's defenses. Under Shah Abbas, the Safavid Empire entered a golden age. He moved the capital to the magnificent city of Isfahan, transforming it into one of the most beautiful urban centers of the early modern world. Grand boulevards, gardens, bridges, mosques, and palaces reshaped the city's landscape. At the heart of this transformation stood the vast square known today as Naqsh-e-Gij, a Han square surrounded by architectural masterpieces that symbolize the power and cultural brilliance of the Safavid state. Isfahan became a center of art, trade, and intellectual life. merchants from across Asia and Europe traveled to the city, bringing silk, spices, textiles, and precious goods. The Safavid rulers encouraged international trade, allowing European trading companies to establish commercial connections with Persia. These interactions connected Iran to global economic networks, stretching from India to the Mediterranean. Persian art flourished during this period. Safavid painters created intricate miniature illustrations that combined vibrant color with delicate detail. Carpet weaving reached extraordinary levels of craftsmanship, producing Persian rugs that became prized possessions across the world. Architecture blended geometric precision with spiritual symbolism, filling mosques and palaces with elegant tile work and calligraphy. Persian culture, which had survived centuries of conquest and transformation, once again stood at the center of a powerful empire. Religious life also developed in distinctive ways. Shia scholarship expanded through the establishment of seminaries and religious institutions.
Shia scholarship expanded through the establishment of seminaries and religious institutions.
Rituals commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Hussein at Karbala became central expressions of communal identity and spiritual devotion. These ceremonies strengthened the emotional and cultural bonds that connected people throughout the Safavid realm. At the same time, the empire remained a complex and diverse society. Ethnic groups including Persians, Turks, Armenians, Kurds, and others lived within its borders. Different communities participated in trade, crafts, administration, and cultural production. Shah Abbas also pursued ambitious diplomatic strategies. Recognizing the threat posed by the Ottoman Empire, he sought alliances with European powers that also viewed the Ottomans as rivals. Envoys traveled between Persian and European courts, exchanging gifts, ideas, and political proposals. These diplomatic contacts helped introduce Persia to a wider world of global politics and commerce. Yet, like all empires, the Safavid state eventually faced challenges that it could not fully overcome. After the death of Shah Abbas, weaker rulers struggled to maintain the strong centralized leadership that had sustained the empire's prosperity. Internal corruption, declining military strength, and external invasions gradually eroded Safavid power. By the early 18th century, rebellions and foreign attacks destabilized the state. In 1722, Afghan forces captured Isfahan, bringing the Safavid dynasty to a dramatic end, but the transformation the Safavids had created could not be undone. Through their rule, they had permanently reshaped the religious and cultural identity of Iran, embedding Shia Islam deeply within the nation's social and political life while reviving the traditions of Persian statehood and artistic achievement. By the early 20th century, the land of Iran stood at the edge of profound transformation. For generations, the country had been ruled by monarchs who claimed authority through ancient traditions of kingship. Yet the modern world was pressing in from every direction. Foreign powers competed for influence over Iranian resources and politics, while new ideas about democracy, nationalism, and modernization spread among intellectuals and ordinary citizens. Monarchy that ruled Iran during much of the 19th century was the Qajar dynasty. Though its rulers maintained formal authority, their power had weakened under the growing pressure of outside empires, particularly Russia and Britain. Concessions granted to foreign companies allowed outsiders to control large parts of Iran's economy, including trade routes and natural resources. Many Iranians began to feel that their country's sovereignty was slipping away. This growing frustration led to one of the earliest modern political movements in the Middle East, the Persian Constitutional Revolution of 1905. Merchants, scholars, clerics, and urban workers united in protest against corruption and absolute rule. Demonstrations spread across cities as people demanded the creation of a constitution and a representative parliament. By 1906, these demands forced the monarchy to accept the establishment of a national assembly. The new constitution attempted to limit royal authority and introduce a system of law that reflected the will of the people. Though the experiment faced intense resistance and instability, it planted powerful ideas about political participation and national independence that would influence Iranian society for decades. The years that followed were turbulent. Internal struggles and foreign interference weakened the constitutional system, and the country struggled to maintain stability. Out of this uncertain environment emerged a military officer whose ambitions would reshape Iran's future, Reza Shah. In 1921, Reza Khan led a coup that gradually brought him to power. By 1925, he had replaced the Qajar dynasty and established the Pahlavi dynasty. Crowned as Reza Shah, he set out to transform Iran into a modern, centralized state. His vision was bold and sweeping. He built railways, strengthened the national army, expanded education, and attempted to reduce the influence of tribal leaders and regional powers. Roads connected distant parts of the country, while new institutions aimed to modernize administration and industry. Reza Shah also sought to reshape Iranian identity by emphasizing national pride rooted in the country's ancient Persian heritage. In 1935, the government formally reclaimed. Instead, that foreign nations used the name Iran instead of Persia in international communication. Yet modernization came with strict political control. Opposition voices were often suppressed, and critics accused the government of authoritarian rule. Still, many of the reforms laid the groundwork for a more centralized and modern state. During the turmoil of the Second World War, international forces again intervened in Iran. Concerned about strategic supply routes and political alliances, British and Soviet forces occupied the country in 1941. Reza Shah was forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Shah. The younger Shah inherited a nation that was both modernizing and deeply divided. In the years after the war, Iran became a focal point of global political competition. During the Cold War, the country's vast oil resources attracted international attention, and disputes over control of those resources intensified political conflict inside Iran. One of the most dramatic moments came in 1951 when Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh moved to nationalize Iran's oil industry, which had long been dominated by foreign companies. His decision was celebrated by many Iranians as a bold assertion of national sovereignty. But the crisis also triggered international pressure and internal political turmoil. In 1953, a coup supported by foreign intelligence agencies removed Mossadegh from power and strengthened the authority of the Shah. Over the following decades, Mohammad Reza Shah launched ambitious modernization programs designed to transform Iran into a powerful industrial nation. His policies, often referred to as the White Revolution, expanded education, introduced land reforms, and promoted economic development. Skyscrapers rose in Tehran, industries expanded, and Iran's economy grew rapidly. Yet beneath the surface of progress, dissatisfaction, His growing rapid modernization disrupted traditional social structures. Economic inequality widened, and political freedoms remained limited. Many religious leaders, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens felt alienated by the government's authoritarian style and its close ties with Western powers. Among the most influential critics of the Shah was a cleric who had been exiled from the country, Ruhollah Khomeini. From exile, Khomeini condemned the monarchy and called for a government based on Islamic principles. His message spread through recordings, writings, and networks of supporters across Iran. By the late 1970s, protests against the Shah's government were spreading rapidly. Demonstrations filled the streets of major cities as workers, students, religious groups, and political activists demanded change. The crisis reached its climax in 1979 during the Iranian Revolution. Millions of people participated in strikes and protests that paralyzed the country. Facing overwhelming pressure, the Shah left Iran in January 1979. Within weeks, Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile to a massive public welcome. The monarchy that had ruled Iran for centuries collapsed. In its place emerged a new political system known as the Islamic Republic. The new government combined elements of republican institutions with religious authority, placing ultimate leadership in the hands of a supreme religious figure. The revolution dramatically reshaped Iran's relationship with the world. Soon after the establishment of the new state, tensions with Western nations escalated, particularly during the hostage crisis at the American embassy in Tehran. The country also faced an enormous external challenge when neighboring Iraq launched an invasion in 1980. The resulting conflict, known as the Iran-Iraq War, lasted 8 brutal years. The war devastated cities, claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and placed immense strain on Iranian society. Despite the destruction, the country endured the conflict and eventually reached a ceasefire in 1988. In the decades that followed, Iran continued navigating the complexities of modern politics, economic pressures, and international tensions. Sanctions, diplomatic disputes, and internal debates about reform and governance shaped the nation's path through the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Throughout these struggles, Iranian society remained dynamic and diverse. Universities produced scholars and scientists. Artists continued rich traditions of literature and film, and ordinary citizens balanced modern life with deep historical memory. The story of modern Iran became one of constant negotiation between tradition and change, revolution and stability, national pride, and global pressures. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join the space of presence and share you deepest now in the comments below. Subcrips, thanks for watching this video and don't forget to like and feed.